Behold, a bunch of once PvP exclusive augments can now be used in normal gameplay. I got a full set of the augments in question as part of Day 1 access through the Warframe partner program, thank you Digital Extremes, but I've also played some Conclave in the past, so you'll have noticed that I already had a few of these augments. You can conveniently get them as Cred rewards from Nightwave Season 3 Glassmaker. That's right here, and you'll see that different ones will rotate in and out each week, so check back for the ones you want. And you'll get Crystal Cred, which is what you use to buy those throughout the reward track. So there's a lot to discuss. I'm going to go through all of them, show you what they do, tell you what I think, and I'm also going to give feedback because most of the Warframe ones are pretty bad, but they could easily become pretty good. I'm going to start with the weapon augments because most of them already are pretty good. First of all, we'll start with Skull Shots. This gives the Viper infinite ammo for 2 seconds when you get a headshot with it. You can't refresh this buff while it's active, so you can't sustain your ammo forever. You will gradually run out even with perfect accuracy, but the Viper does okay damage and is rather ammo inefficient with a tiny magazine, so being able to shoot it for this long is something. The Viper already does have an augment called Stinging Truth that increases its magazine size by 40. These kind of solve the same problem. Basically, the magazine is very small. The reload is quick, but if you're doing that every single second because the fire rate is so high, it's a little bit less quick. It means about half the time you're shooting, you're reloading. So you do want to fix that, somehow avoid the reload a little bit. These kind of both do that, and I think Skull Shots does a better job most of the time. You do get a Syndicate effect from this one. Neither of them are Excellus. I think you should use this one. So yeah, I'm not sure that this is a good reason to go get a Viper Wraith, but it's sure not bad. Brainstorm, now we're talking. Infinite ammo for the GRAKATA that can be used alongside Wild Frenzy, sort of, we'll get back to that in a second. It only lasts 1 second, and again, this cannot be refreshed while active, but the PRISMA GRAKATA does solid damage. You could slap this on a normal build and have a good time with it, but come on, as you can see, that's not what we're going to do. Wild Frenzy, Brainstorm, PRISMA GRAKATA. This build is really greedy. You need to give it some help from a frame. You've noticed that to have enough room for these two augments, I needed to take off base damage and critical chance, both of which you desperately want on this weapon. You could try to take off something else. I think you should take off base damage and critical chance. I think you really want the status still there, and you definitely still want the crits. You want the multi-shot for sure. You also desperately want recoil reduction. Luckily, there happens to be a corrupted mod that reduces weapon recoil by 90% and only gives you a little negative fire rate, which does not matter when we're using Wild Frenzy since it gives you 400%. So that's good. It's not too hard to get your base damage and crit chance from somewhere else. I know not everybody is going to love that. Not everybody likes to go get their stats from somewhere else, from a frame, from arcanes or whatever, but at the end of the day, you have 400% fire rate with nearly infinite ammo. So my sympathies are limited. The damage is pretty good, you'll have to take my word for it. Get base damage from arcanes, or get the crit chance from Harrow or an Adarza or arcanes, Arcane Avenger. And as you can see, you can, you can't aim down sights while using the secondary fire. But I don't care. This is totally adequate. The reason that I'm using Wildfire, you noticed in the build before, is that as you're seeing, you do miss some shots. It's a little bit difficult to, you'd kind of just have to vaguely spray at enemies' heads, and then you do miss here and there. So having some ammo headway really does allow the weapon to be usable for longer. Eventually, as you can see, when you press the fire button, you spray out however many rounds are in your magazine. So when Wild Frenzy says it fires until your magazine is empty, it actually means it fires until your magazine would be empty if you didn't have infinite ammo. So most of the time that means you're firing 144 rounds, because that's what my magazine is with Wildfire, or less. As you miss some, you're going to be firing less and less. So you get this behavior where you have to burst more and more and more often, and then eventually you're just firing it as a semi-auto weapon and tapping secondary fire over and over. At that point, you should just reload it even if you're not out of ammo. So yeah, I don't know, this build handles very strangely, but even without, we had no base damage or critical chance there, and the damage still kind of speaks for itself. So very cool build, definitely requires some investment to get the maximum greed version, but again, this would be fine without Wild Frenzy. It's just like the thing with the Viper Wraith, it would be solid. A little note about Arcane Pistolier. Obviously mod slots and arcane slots are different, so also consider Pistolier if you like that kind of infinite ammo effect. Pistolier can't be triggered by primary weapons, but once triggered by your secondary, the effect does benefit primaries too for the duration. Ambush optics, the Rubico gets less zoom in the Exilis slot. Reduced zoom can be very nice because snipers get powerful bonuses when scoped in, but oftentimes that inhibits your field of vision. This lets you use the scope bonuses and also see things. Good, very simple. The Rubico Prime is good. This is nice. I'll probably spend a format to fit it in that Exilis slot. I want more zoom reduction mods. Double tap. So double tap is a LATRON augment. The LATRON is a semi-automatic rifle with middle-of-the-road stats and no special abilities. I didn't know what it was before this. This augment gives the LATRON a stacking separate multiplier on all of its damage every time you get a hit with it. It says it can stack up to 20 times, so that's 500% damage, and the whole stack refreshes the duration when you get a hit. That's awesome. That's a really huge multiplier. It's kind of similar to the combo multiplier, or like the sniper combo multiplier. It's a little bit like that, but you do lose the whole bonus if you miss a shot, and it only has a 2-second duration, so normally reloading will lose you the bonus too, and again, that 2-second duration, the whole stack falls off if you wait 2 seconds without getting a hit. So this is a fairly common design structure where you get a ton of raw damage, but you have to use a very mediocre delivery system for that damage. In other words, a 500 damage multiplier is pretty insane, but to balance that out, you have to use the LATRON, which is not very insane, to put it politely. LATRON Prime is the standout best variant. LATRON WRAITH has a little bit more crit, but this version has significantly more base damage. It's not worth it. So you can use this like a normal semi-auto weapon. As you can see, it's got a small magazine. It's not like particularly exciting to shoot. It has a long reload comparatively. It's got a pretty small magazine. So I hope you can tell by the tone of my voice that that is not a thing that we're going to do. We're going to build it like something totally different. If you do use it as sort of a semi-auto just rifle, which again I really don't recommend, I don't think that's good, you probably don't want to use status because you're going to kill enemies in like 2 shots or so. That would be the payoff. If you get headshots, you're going to kill them pretty quickly. It's going to fall off really hard at like level 100 or so because enemies are going to start surviving a few shots, and you would have benefited from status, but we're not going to build it that way. No, to play to this mod's strengths and lessen its weaknesses, I recommend turning this into more of an assault rifle. So by firing faster, we're going to stack the bonuses up quicker, we'll recover more quickly from losing the bonuses if you miss, and you can make use of the LATRON Prime's solid status chance. Stabilizer becomes a very important addition that will allow you to reliably hit enemies while firing quickly. Normally one miss is no big deal, but here you lose a lot of damage if that happens. The magazine is small, so you get a lot out of reload speed too, but that's not so hard to get. That fits perfectly on a frame like Gauss with Redline active. Redline gives the large amount of fire rate we want, and reload speed. You could also use other things. Chroma, Toxin Chroma gives a lot of reload speed, and then you get the fire rate from an Arcane. Harrow's Penance gives you the stats you want, but anyway, Gauss will work fine. So you'll see that we're going to fire up more rapidly now, and the bonus stacks up very fast, and the reload is very quick, and we can carry it over. The only risk here is you really need to stop shooting quite promptly, or you lose the bonus just like killing enemies. The damage ramps up, and then you shoot one more time than you need to, and you lose the bonus, and you can get it back again very fast. You can see like we have it back again very quickly just shooting one target. You can see in the top corner, it gets up to almost 500% just shooting one target. That's good. It's not amazing. It's hard to not lose the bonus when you kill something by just shooting too many times, but it's still very good. The damage is totally there. It becomes basically sort of like a heavy assault weapon. It has very good ammo efficiency for an assault type weapon. Makes use of that status. It's fairly safe to miss, like you're not punished too much if you miss because you're firing more rapidly. Really rewards tactical reloading, like reloading when your magazine is not fully empty, so you don't lose the buff. A tip for this is that you should really make sure that you reload manually anyway, even if you do empty your clip. If you wait for the automatic reload, there's a slight but meaningful delay that can lose you your double tap buff, so I'm going to show you. So we'll empty the clip, and it'll naturally reload. And you see there's a little delay. I kind of just did nothing for half a second. And then if we empty it, and then I manually reload, you can reload right away. And you see there is, a small but meaningful difference that can lose you or keep you the buff. So anyway, overall I had a lot to say about that one. It's really solid, leads itself to a pretty effective weapon that's fairly unique. You just need to give it the support it wants. It wants the fire rate, it wants some reload speed. So find a way to get it some fire rate and a lot of reload speed, and you're in business. Focused Acceleration. This is a flight speed mod for the TETRA. And I'll refresh your memory. The TETRA is that weapon with the bouncy augment, the bouncy bullets thing, that doesn't do very good damage. Look at that crit chance. So this is not that much more flight speed than the normal flight speed mod for rifles. Terminal velocity gives 60%. Focused acceleration gives 80% while aiming. They're both Excellus, and you can equip both. The TETRA doesn't have viable crit stats anyway, so you do have the space. You can see I could put this in the Excellus slot if I spent a Forma. If I spent 2 Forma. Which I don't know if that's the thing I'm going to do. So I don't think this needs to be any stronger necessarily, but I think it would be nice if the TETRA was a little stronger. So I'm kind of lukewarm on this one. Let's just equip this for fun. Okay, wow. For fun here. And try shooting it, and... well... Alright, listen, I'll level with you. I'll say that I think this is pretty fun if you'll support me on Patreon to pay for the laser eye surgery that I'll need after playing with this. If you are rich IRL and can afford laser eye surgery, this is good. I cannot. Directed convergence. This makes the SUPRA perfectly accurate while aiming. This one I cannot even remotely fit on my normal, very simple SUPRA build, so I'm just going to demonstrate the difference. Accuracy with it on and accuracy with it off, using multi-shot and a little fire rate. So here's how it looks with it off. This one is not an Excellus augment, which makes sense. It does directly increase your damage because this weapon is inaccurate enough by default. You can see plenty of those bullets would be missing a target's head at least, if not their body. And so if I equip it and it gains perfect accuracy, you will be doing more damage. You are hitting more bullets on target. As you can see, it becomes a laser. It still has a little recoil, you'll notice, but it does become much more accurate. You will definitely do more damage with this augment on. So the question is it enough more damage? Is that enough of an improvement compared to the other things you could be using in that last slot? I don't think so. I think the competition is very good. Entropy Burst is a popular energy supplementary restoring augment. Gives you some status. You get a syndicate power that restores a little energy. That's good. It's helpful. Prime Tread is a popular mod on this weapon for good reason. It kind of does the same thing in the sense that this makes more of your bullets hit, and this makes the bullets that do hit more enemies. That only works in a crowd, but this is a horde shooter. I don't know. I'm not sure how to buff this one. Either it's too strong for the Excellus slot, in my opinion. It would just be an auto-include. And it does increase your damage pretty directly, but maybe that's not different enough from recoil reduction like we were using earlier. I'm not sure. Maybe it should be Excellus. What do you all think? Finishing out the weapon augments, shrapnel rounds. Lots of multi-shot for the MARELOK. That 66% damage reduction is base damage, so it's additive with Hornet Strike. You aren't really losing that much base damage. It's like turning your Hornet Strike into Serration. Your Hornet Strike gets downgraded to Serration in exchange for 2 split chambers worth of multi-shot. That's really good. This is another one like Double Tap where it's made fair by the weapon you have to use it on, but the exchange is a little less extreme here. The MARELOK is quite alright, but not amazing, and this is a much stronger than average mod, so you kind of break even and get something viable. I recommend slotting this in place of Lethal Torrent. The marginal benefit of 60% more multi-shot when you already have 320% is not very high, and the fire rate is only okay on this type of weapon. Having lots of multi-shot for this weapon is also really good because the MARELOK has a very coin-flippy crit chance. Good stuff, lots of positive things to say about these weapon augments. I recommend most of them, probably all of them, except maybe Directed Convergence. Oh, and Focused Acceleration if you don't like being bankrupt and or firing lasers into your eyes. I am not that excited about the Warframe augments, but as I mentioned at the top of the video, I think most of them can be changed and made good very easily with only minor changes. So I'll group them by what I think is holding them back. I'll start with the ones that I don't think are good because they don't affect the user in any way. So you, the person using the augment, nothing benefits you about these augments. So that's Purging Slash, Recharge Barrier, and Purifying Flames. So again, the problem with these three is that they do not do anything whatsoever to you. Equipping these has no effect on you, the player. These are mostly kind of reasonable effects, it depends on which one, but none of them affect you in any way. They're just not strong enough for that. I think they simply should affect you as well as allies. But Excalibur's Purging Slash here would probably be too strong that way. You'd be able to instantly get your shield gate at any time. I think it would be fine to just cut the shields down to like 50%. Volt's Recharge Barrier. So this does scale with strength, so again, maybe a bit strong if it affected you, and it could be 100%. It seems fine to me to cap these at like 90% or something. Lots of defensive abilities that scale with strength already work that way. Ember's Purifying Flames, I'm not sure status immunity is good enough on its own for a full mod slot. Off the top of my head, maybe this could give a damage bonus if it successfully protects against a status effect. The duration probably also needs to be longer, even if you mod it, that seems really short. Ember is sort of a utility bruiser frame anyway, I guess, so she's not a bad frame for an effect like this, but this is not a particularly good effect. I do think it doesn't earn a mod slot, even if it did affect you, which it doesn't. At present, Warframe is just not a game where you form a tightly knit squad and work together like clockwork. It could become that kind of game, but unless it does, these mods need to benefit you, the player, in some way, in my opinion. So moving on to the second and largest problem, I said there was another problem with those 3 augments, and it affects almost all of these. And that problem is that at the time of this recording, you can't equip 2 augments for the same ability at the same time. So for example, if you have Ivar's new Power of 3 augment, you cannot equip Empowered Quiver at the same time because they augment the same ability. You can swap them, you can't equip both of them at the same time. Almost all of the augments that were added in this little update augment an ability that already has an augment and a very good augment. And the solution is really simple, I think. You should be able to use multiple augments for the same ability as long as they don't have conflicting behavior. You can do that for weapons, like we showed the GRAKATA and the TETRA today, just to name a few of many examples. And then there are exceptions made for functionality, like with the Penta's 2 augments, which you can't equip together. But generally, you can use multiple weapon augments together, because why wouldn't you be able to? There's no reason that shouldn't also be true for ability augments. The great thing about Warframe is that stacking augments like this is inherently balanced out by the nature of the modding system. We've seen a lot of the times as we've been going through these augments, like with the GRAKATA. When I was using the 2 augments on it, that's inherently balanced by the fact that you don't have enough mod space to just run 2 augments and run everything else, right? You've got to give something up. And so there's inherently a trade-off. That's why, for example, a separate augment slot doesn't really make sense. Augments just have to be a fair trade. And they often are. Many of these augments would be a fair trade as long as they didn't additionally prevent you from using another good augment for that same ability. So again, for example, Power of 3, this is a reasonable augment. 3 sleep arrows is great. As you'll see, you can cover a pretty reasonable area. Like you imagine if these had decent range, that's pretty nice. They spread in a way that is useful. You could do 3 cloak arrows. That's totally not useless if you made the range bigger. In fact, let's do that. But again, the problem is that Ivar's other quiver augment is pretty good. It gives you crit damage that can scale with strength. This would even be good with that crit damage augment because it can create 3 dash wires. Having triple dash wires that all have crit damage on them sounds really fun. More stealth bubbles for more status immunity, that sounds really fun. The augment also makes your cloak arrow give status immunity. That's cool. So again, we'll run a bunch of range, and you can just imagine if you could use both of those things together, you would have this awesome situation, that's enough, where you fire these out, and suddenly, like, whoa, there's this huge area of safety. Or you fire multiple sleep arrows, and that covers a huge area, right? So really the solution here is just to make them able to be equipped together. Let us use both at the same time. Nyx's new Singularity augment is kind of a different situation. I personally think that Absorb is pretty much useless by itself, and Singularity doesn't fix that. By the way, the pull range was not affected by mods in my testing, but you'll see that it is a pretty robust pull. I can do it, say, here, and enemies they get sure do get yanked right toward you, you know? If you could use Assimilate while you had this active, it would be really good. I don't think that's a perfect solution. Then we're in a situation where it's a good augment, but only if you have another good augment. So the augment itself is still not really good, but again, Assimilate is reasonable. Maybe Absorb just needs some changes, but I don't think that this effect is bad. I think what's bad about it is that it prevents you from using another good augment on top of the cost you already pay, which is a mod slot, you know? So again, I say let us use both. Again, limiting us to 1 augment at a time for each ability also hurts those first 3 augments I mentioned. Volt in particular has an extremely powerful electric shield augment that you of course cannot equip at the same time as recharge barrier. Ember's other fire blast augment is pretty solid. It's some pretty solid healing. Excalibur's surging dash, you know, exists. You can do some stuff with this. It scales with strength. Anyway, the point is, just keep in mind as I talk about the rest of the augments, I think we really ought to be able to just use multiple ability augments at once, and that would fix a lot of the problems with these in one fell swoop, while still being inherently kind of balanced. Prism Guard. Oh boy, this locks Mirage's Prism on her left shoulder and gives it an extremely low but moddable with duration. I think this one is almost always actively bad, so even as I demonstrate this, I'm going to be using a build that we tried on stream to make this as good as possible, and this is still how it is. So you cast it, very long cast time, then it pops on your shoulder, it's going to follow you around. It still drains energy while active. I think this one is almost always actively bad. It's not just that it isn't good, you're actively making the ability worse than it would be without this augment. You keep the energy drain while Prism is out, and you have to frequently recast it. The duration is very low, so it doesn't work for preparing a Prism in case you need to blow it up for a blind. The augment doesn't shorten Prism's crazy casting speed, and if anything, you have to do that more often now because it automatically explodes after 12 seconds, so now it has a short duration and you need to keep recasting it in the first place, which is also not a good thing. It is literally my job to think of specific situations in which things like this might be useful, and I can't think of any. I don't have every idea ever, but I do think that says something. Yet I think the solution is once again very simple. Simply increase the base duration a lot and remove the energy cost to maintain it. So for now, let's say 10 or 15 seconds at base, and then it just doesn't cost energy over time. So basically, the augment changes Prism from a channeled ability to just a duration-based ability with only an upfront energy cost, and then it lives on your shoulder. Then Prism would be useful for prepping a Prism early and saving it until you need to blow it up for a blind, which is not amazing, but I would certainly use that version. Side note, if you swap your camera angle, so we're going to cast Prism, and then you swap your camera angle like this, Prism doesn't move to your other shoulder, so crack open those wallets again for Zandy's super fun Patreon laser eye surgery stretch goal. Just a quick disclaimer, I have very healthy eyesight, deceptive bond, so in my testing, this doesn't do anything. It straight up doesn't work and does absolutely nothing at the moment in my testing, so I will do my best to talk about it theoretically, and there's still plenty to say. So first of all, Loki has an invisibility skill already. So this augment is offloading damage to the decoy or letting Loki be a tank for the decoy. And I don't see much of a need for either tankiness for Loki or tankiness for the clone if that's the way this is meant to be useful, because you can simply be invisible. You're not. It doesn't matter whether you are tanky, nor that the clone is tanky. The clone is also extremely squishy. The second thing is that Loki has another decoy augment called Savior Decoy, and the way this one works is that you put it somewhere in the environment. Generally, I like to put it up high on a lot of tile sets, and when you die, you will be teleported to it, it will die, and then you get a little, like a minute-long cooldown before it can save you again. So that already does the job better. Basically, like if there's an errant explosion that hits you even though you're in stealth, this saves you. So there's no need for a first ability augment for Loki that saves you even if you're stealthed. That already exists. Like, that's very specific, but that amazingly that already exists. I think that the biggest thing here is that this is just a very PvP focused augment. The main thing is that you can really see that this is for PvP. Decoy is a piece of paper in normal missions, but against scaled down enemy players in Conclave, I kind of get it. Overall, this is the only one where I really don't know what to say. I don't see how anything even close to this effect could be relevant in PvE. Not everything has to be good, that's fine, but I do think this one may have been a mistake. I do appreciate the effort to add lots of interesting stuff, Conclave augments, to the rest of the game. And as somebody who did play some Conclave a while back, a lot of the ones I was excited about were the ones that were chosen, so I like that. I can live with one augment that I feel is kind of unsalvageable in PvE. Rumbled is the last augment we're talking about today, and it's probably the hardest to patch up. So this is sort of like Iron Skin. You turn into a Rumbler yourself and become extremely tanky. The problem is that you can't jump at all. You cannot parkour in any way. You can't bullet jump, you can't slide, you can't jump. If I fall down this, I cannot get back up. Like, I'm stuck down here forever until I blow this up. You can manually deactivate it, of course, and you can activate it in the air. You can, like, aim glide for a sec, but then you can't jump anymore. So that's not good. You can't use your weapons either. All you can do is use Landslide, your first ability punches, and you can use these two rumbled specific attacks. You can throw a rock, you can auto throw rocks like this, or it's semi-auto, and then you have this sort of ground slam attack. These do scale with weapon mods, but they don't crit or do status. Even if they did do good damage, they are extremely high prices to pay in PvE. Not being able to jump is basically a death sentence. This augment lets you become very tanky, but you'll note that Atlas is already very, very tanky, one of the last frames in the game that needs an ability like this, and in exchange you basically can't interact with the mission, like you can't really affect the mission. I think, like with Deceptive Bond, these restrictions make a lot of sense in Conclave. Personally, this was something I used a lot in Conclave, and it felt pretty fair to be grounded in exchange for tankiness, and the rock throws do great damage to enemy players. This is good in Conclave. As long as you're not fighting players that are insane and you won't be able to hit them, and then you're grounded while they're not. Against average players, this is a good mod for some casual Conclave if you're in the market, but that stuff doesn't work at all in normal missions. Of course, the most important change is to allow the rumbled form to jump and parkour. Then I think there would be potential, maybe if you could also equip Titanic Rumbler. I like the idea of being able to get a Rumbler while you have rumbled. Of course, by default you don't, but if you could equip Titanic Rumbler, and then you also get a big rumbler, and you could still punch, and you could jump, and you could throw the rocks. You kind of have some zone control. You could hold your ground very well. I don't necessarily think that Rumble needs to be just Iron Skin to be good. We don't have to be able to use our normal weapons, but you really can't play most Warframe missions without the ability to jump entirely. I hope this changes, because being a Rumbler is a fun idea that I know many people, myself included, were initially excited to see come to PvE. And I mean, just look at him. Like, everybody wants to be a Rumbler. So that's what I have to say about these augments. Lots of the weapon ones are pretty solid. Pretty much all of the frame ones are bad, but could easily be made much better. I really hope we do see some changes for those augments, and I look forward to playing with them more if we do. I hope you found my video helpful, and I'll catch you later.